Hi, my name is Gabrielle Walkie, and for my spring action research study, I did the effect of bilingual literature on English language learners' reading comprehension. So the purpose and reason for this study was to investigate whether bilingual books and literature have a positive effect on English language learners' reading comprehension. This study also investigated whether bilingual literature has a positive effect on ELL's emotional response while reading the literature. This study was significant in that it helped decrease the gap between my English language learners students, native English students' reading comprehension scores. The two questions within my study were, number one, how does the use of bilingual and native language integration within children's literature affect reading comprehension of English language learners? And two, if students are assessed using bilingual literature, will these books positively affect the participants' social emotional response after reading? The key terms within my study were reading comprehension, of course, ELL, English language learner, bilingualism, monolingualism, lexical memory, and schema. Moving on to the review of the literature. The main three studies that I researched were, number one, early elementary grade dual language learners from Spanish-speaking homes struggling with English reading comprehension, the dormant role of language skills. Two, a longitudinal analysis of English language learners' word decoding and research comprehension. And number three, the effect of bilingualism on the developing of English reading skill. In all of these studies, what drew me to them was that they really tapped into how and what techniques educators should be using to advocate for English language learners, specifically in reading. But within this research, there were gaps that I wanted to fill, and I built my study around. And the first one was that I wanted to see if the literature in itself and the language within the literature could positively affect their reading scores. And also, when researching, I found that most studies never tied in the emotional side to the academics, and there were no assessments on how they felt while reading books in English and Spanish. My participants were chosen based off of convenience sampling, and within my study, my participants attended an elementary school in a rural East Coast town in a class of predominantly monolingual English students, and there were 8 first grade students in my class that were from Spanish-speaking households. So my research design was a mixed method study due to the fact that I had quantitative data from my comprehension quizzes and qualitative data based on the emotional response surveys. The instruments that I used to collect data were very summative and formative assessments. I used reading comprehension quizzes, surveys, and then my own observations as well. And the quizzes were analyzed on their comprehension of the books read, and the surveys were done after reading the books to assess their emotional response to reading bilingual literature. My procedures were, first, I obtained consent and then assent. I next read an English children's book aloud and gave them a comprehension quiz. And then after that, I administered an emotional response survey, which assessed how they felt while reading. Next, I read a bilingual English and Spanish children's book aloud and gave them a comprehension quiz. And next, I administered my emotional response survey. And I repeated this step 3 times, and then I gave all of my participants an exit survey. The books that I did within my study, I did 6 in total, 3 bilingual and 3 monolingual English only. And the one at the top were all the Spanish books. They were Señorita Mariposa, Abuela, The Day of the Dead, El Dia de los Muertos. And then at the bottom, there were my English books. They were The True Story of the 3 Little Pigs, I'm Invited to a Party, and Kindness is Cooler, Miss Ruler. Here is my exit survey and the emotional response survey as well. The emotional response survey just said how they felt while reading. Did they enjoy reading the books? Did the characters remind them of their family? And then what was your favorite part of the book? And then the exit survey did the exact same thing, but asked them specifically what you wanted to see next in your class, if you like these books, if you wanted to continue reading bilingual books. The way that I analyzed my data, so for my comprehension questions, I used descriptive statistics to measure growth, and then my emotional response survey, I used qualitative analysis using constant comparative analysis to measure reactions to the survey. So getting into the data, my quantitative data you can see in the chart below. It's showing the average of reading comprehension quiz scores, and I had 3 sessions. So in green, you see the Spanish English book scores, and in red, you see the English book scores. In session 1, my students scored a 4.3 out of 5 on average with the bilingual literature, and a 2.4 out of 5 on average for the English book. In session 2, they scored an average of 4 out of 5 on the Spanish and English book, and a 2.5 out of 5 on the English book. And lastly, in session 3, they scored a 5 out of 5 on their comprehension quiz for the Spanish book, and they scored a 1.8 out of 5 in the on average in the English book. So when I looked at my data, I could see constant growth, not only in the physical scores, but also in their quickness and how quickly they were able to answer and confidently they were able to answer. For my qualitative data, here are some lovely student testimonials that they gave through the emotional response surveys. I'll read a few. I felt better while reading the book en español. I liked Abuela's dresses. Carlos looks like me. My madre would like this book, and I want to keep reading books like this. And the favorite book was Mariposa, which is a book about a butterfly. And their least favorite book was The True Story of the Three Little Pigs, and they shared because they were a little lost. So in conclusion, after collecting all my data, observations, and analyzing the findings, it was found that native language integration into children's books is extremely beneficial for English language learners' reading comprehension, and also their emotional response to reading these books. After looking at this data, I was able to show how my theory, my hypothesis was proven true with the qualitative data results that showed how the participants felt more relaxed while reading, and then also their scores that, excuse me, showed that they really learned a lot from reading. Excuse me, moving on. The results concluded that the English language learners' reading comprehension scores did benefit from Spanish and English native language integration instruction, and was an instructional scaffolding technique that increased their scores in a short time frame. Again, this was 3 sessions. The results also conclude that ELO students felt more represented and less anxious and more connected while reading Spanish and English books. Alrighty. So limitations to my study was that my participants were English language learners from my neighboring first grade classroom, which meant that they weren't within my physical classroom. This was a strong limitation because I constantly had to reorganize our sessions due to scheduling, whether they're being pulled for ESOL grouping and guided reading. And there were actually 2 instances where I had to stop my session in the middle because I only got through reading the English book because they had to be pulled. So that was a strong limitation. And also I had a relatively small research group due to the nature of my specific group of students being ELLs. And there was only so many in the classroom, therefore my data was a little more individualistic. And looking into further research, if the study were to be extended into a future research, an incredibly important question would be to see how native language integration within the assessment language can affect testing and assessment scores. I would want to know, do native language incorporated assessments positively affect ELL's academic scores? This would begin to tap into the possibility for schools to be more multilingual and accommodating in general. I think that this study can go so much further, and this would be something that I would be extremely interested in the future. Alrighty, well, that's all. If you have any questions at all or comments or just want to reach out, please email me. I've left it right here. And thank you so incredibly much for listening, even through my crappy throat right at the end. I hope you all have a wonderful day and keep educating. Bye.